Okay, so a very good morning to you. The topic of discussion that we have today is the free market economy and the price mechanism. And in this topic, I would also like to discuss some basic ideas of elasticity of demand as well. Uh, Before we go into the details, we need to understand the basic law of demand. The law of demand is the basic foundation of economic theory. And it says that the quantity demanded, the amount of quantity demanded of a commodity, of a good, of a service diminishes when its price rises. And the same amount, the same thing, the same quantity goes up, increases when the price falls, comma, and then very important expression, other things being equal, other things being equal. In other words, there is an inverse relationship between price and demand. As the price goes up, the demand goes down, but as the price goes down, the demand goes up. And remember this expression once again, other things being equal. I'll come back to it, why we call it other things being equal or ceteris paribus. But one more thing, I know many of you have done this law in the previous studies, but we try to make it, we try to articulate it as much as we can. So basically, we have a demand function. Yep. I'm not sharing it. So remember that the demand of anything depends on several factors. So if I say demand for coffee, demand for coffee depends on, I use the expression F for the function, which means depends on. So demand for coffee depends on the price of coffee Can you please tell me what else the demand for coffee may depend on? Well, it depends on, of course, the income of consumers. If you're a rich person, you can buy more coffee. If you're poor, you can be starving because of coffee. So income of consumer. It also depends on, because in the modern life, we have a one good feature of, or bad feature, whatever, subject to debate, is that in the market economy, in the modern day and age, you have plethora, you have plenty of goods and services which can fulfill your certain specific demand. I know we become addict, we become used to, we become so obsessed with, but sometimes there are more than one commodity which satisfy your same desire. For example, I can talk about myself. I like tea in the morning, but the rest of the day I can live on coffee. So it means that basically tea and coffee are somewhat my close substitutes of giving me enough energy to my brain that I can function. Of course, I can't compare coffee and Pepsi. So I can't say that, hey, in the morning, either I take coffee or Pepsi. No, it doesn't work like that. So it has to be a choice between tea or coffee. You get my point? When you want to come to school, you have a choice between a bike and a bus. But you can't say that if I want to go to school, I have a choice between bike and McDonald's burger or some pizza or something. So because that doesn't make any connection between the two of the things. So it means that we have a phenomenon called substitutes. And disclaimer, when I say substitute, it doesn't mean exactly cent percent substitutes. They can be close substitutes. So tea and coffee can be reckoned as the close substitute. You get my point? So it means that the demand for tea may also depends on not only price of, my apologies. Demand for coffee not only depends on price of coffee, but it also depends on price of tea. For instance, if tea becomes very cheaper, and when you compare the price, coffee hasn't become expensive, but tea has become cheaper. You compare coffee price and tea price and say, hey, you know what? Relatively, tea is now cheaper. Let's buy it more. I can swap my evening coffee with tea, and you can create all sorts of rationalities and arguments in support of consumption of coffee, of tea. So even though the price of coffee has not risen by a single cent, but because tea has become cheaper, so relatively now coffee is expensive and the tea is cheaper. Absolutely, in the absolute sense, the price of coffee is where it is. But in the comparative sense, the price of coffee is more than now price of tea. Okay, so many consumers can switch over from coffee to tea. So it means the price of tea is also depends, something. It may also depend upon some other factors. Let's say, how to say it? If we talk about demand for coffee, we compare demand for coffee in Uvascula with demand for coffee in London. Look, London is much bigger. Okay, so because of more population, because of the sheer size of the city, whatever is the price, whatever is the income, whatever is the price of substitute, the demand for coffee would be higher in London than in Uvascula. So it means the population is also a very important factor. Another factor which comes to my mind is technology. As the technology becomes more and more advanced, as we're living in a tech era, there are new innovations, there are new attractions. We get attracted by those models, those new brands, those better versions of those gadgets. And sometimes we even think beyond the price and our income if you want to have them. So technology sometimes gives us more options, better options, and sometimes we bypass the other variables and we go and buy them. So there is a there is a streak of factors, determinants, which can impact your demand. So your demand for coffee depends upon several factors, basically. I'm leaving it blank because there can be infinite number of determinants. But now look at the word. The law of demand says that there is now please observe where the cursor is moving here. There is an inverse relationship between price of a commodity and its demand. And now the most important thing, other things being equal. So all these things, except the price of the commodity in question, we assume them to be constant. So we only consider one variable, and that one variable is this: the price of coffee is causing demand for coffee. The rest, everything is constant. Because it's a theory. In the theory, we have to have some assumptions. So it means our assumption is that when you want to compare the price of coffee and demand for coffee with in the context of some consumer, let's say me or somebody else, you will not consider my income. You will not consider the price of tea. You will not consider if I'm living in a more populous city or a sparsely populated city. And technology and all that stuff will have no role to play at all. So only and only you'll be comparing my demand for coffee depending upon the price of coffee alone, ceteris paribus. This all shaded portion is ceteris paribus. Other things being equal. This is law of demand. And what else I can add to your knowledge is that we say that according to the law of demand, there is an inverse relationship between relation between price and demand. Now imagine I asked you a question in the exam, and the question is, describe law of demand. And then you get very excited. You find, oh yes, this is something which we discussed in the classroom. I'm a witness to it. I read it thoroughly. I'm gonna write it. But you know what, you're in a rush. You know, there is a saying that haste makes waste. So you are in a rush to write. And what you do, you write everything fine, but what you do? You say that the law of demand highlights the inverse relationship between demand and price. You know what? With very heavy heart, with tears in my eyes, with my trembling fingers, I have to put a big cross. Wrong answer. Maybe I will skip my meal on that day because I'll be so aghast, so much, you know, shattered with this. You know, there is always some kind of guilt for not doing anything wrong, but guilt for following the rule. You know, I wish I would be fantasizing. I wish you were with me, sitting next to me when writing the exam, and I could advise you, hey, no, make a change. Don't write it demand and price, but write it price and demand. Can you understand my emotional state at this moment? Can you? What's wrong with demand and price? Which is fine. I'll be very happy when you write price and demand, but I'll be super sad when you write demand and price. What's wrong with this? Are you in Zoom? Please make sure that when you say something from your seat, you are in Zoom, because otherwise all our friends in Moodle, in Zoom, they would be left out. So when you are back in Moodle, in Zoom, please let me know, yeah?
At the first place, the price affects the demand, not the demand affects the price. No, at the first place, price change and affect the demand. And you cannot have vice versa. Only this.
Okay. Do you want to say something more about it? Elaborate a bit more?
I don't think so.
Maybe you can mute yourself now. Yeah. Please observe now what I want to highlight. I think now I have to use this drawing thing here. When the price goes up, if price is the cause and demand is the effect, when the price goes up, what happens to demand? Goes down. So I can put the arrow down, right? And when the price goes down, demand goes up. If you see the bold lines and the dotted lines, you see that there is an inverse relationship between price and demand. Am I right? Can you see that there is an inverse relationship? Now see, you by mistake wrote not price and demand, but demand and price. See what happens now. If demand is the cause this time and price is the effect, when demand for something goes up, what happens to the price? If something is more in demand in the market, what happens to the price of it? Goes up. And something which is no longer in demand, who will buy black and white TV nowadays? If the demand is going down, then what happens to price? Is it the inverse relationship now or the direct relationship? Direct relationship. So what happens? Your basic thesis is wrong now. Because the law of demand tells that there is an inverse relationship between price and demand. But when you say demand and price, it becomes a direct relationship. So what happens? You are making a contradiction here. So never, never, never say demand and price. Always say price and demand, because the first word you use is a cause. We never say effect cause, we say cause effect. So the first variable is the cause, and the second is the effect. I hope it makes sense. Slides. So now we know that there is a demand function. There are different variables which have an impact on the demand of a commodity. In the law of demand, we only consider the price of the commodity per se, and we assume everything else constant. There are two reasons. The two reasons why there is an inverse relationship between price and demand. The first reason is the income effect. So the price effect can be decomposed, broken up into two sub-effects. The first sub-effect is called income effect. Whenever the price of something goes down, your real income goes up, isn't it? Imagine I want to buy 4 cartons of milk, and I know that these 4 cartons of milk will cost me, let's say, €6. And I take €6 with me. I go to the store. I want to buy 4 cartons of milk, and with that, I have to pay €6, 1.5, simple. And when I go there, I find that the price of milk has gone down to 1.25, €1.25. And I still need to buy 4 cartons of milk. What happens? I spend €5, not 6. I save money. So my real income goes up. So basically, with the decreasing price, my real income or my buying capacity or my purchasing power goes up. So this is called income effect. The fall in the price enrich you. The second impact is called substitution effect. The substitution effect is that in today's world, we always have substitutes, and we always prefer to buy more of the thing which is relatively cheaper than other. And if price of tea has gone down, and I find that the price of tea gone down so much so that it is comparatively lower than the price of coffee, then I would consume more of tea, because comparatively The price of tea has gone down when compared with coffee price. And I would substitute or I would replace coffee and I would consume more of tea. This is called substitution effect. Since I believe in the theories and the evidences, I have given you the link URL for each of these effects, income effect and substitution effect. These are small articles I took from BBC. They are in practice, they're talking about these two sub effects. But look, BBC is not an economics lesson website, but you need to read between the lines and then you find that, hey, basically this article is talking about the income effect, or basically this article is talking about the substitution effect. Okay, so please go through them. And next week when we come, we will have some discussion about it, or maybe I would appreciate if you can have some discussion on discussion forum, because I noticed that the discussion forum is very much dried up. There's hardly anything for the last few weeks except the messages from the teachers. So use discussion forum and read these articles and give your comments. Another word which I want to, or rather a pair of words which I want to introduce you today is called schedule and curve. For example, we have the price given in pence of something, and we are talking about Kate. Kate is some fictitious name, okay? Not Kate Middleton, but some other Kate, maybe. And then we have somebody called Simon. When the price is going up, we notice that Kate is demanding lower and lower and lower and lower. And when the price is 100 pence, which means £1, Kate doesn't buy anything. Can you see law of demand here? I hope you can see. There is an inverse relationship between price and demand. As the price goes up, demand goes down. Okay, and who are you considering this time? Kate. When you are taking one person, one unit of analysis at a time, one person, one firm, this becomes individual demand schedule. Question, why do we call it a schedule? If you are showing the law of demand in the form of a table, it is called a schedule. Are you with me? If you show the law of demand with some example, but in the form of a table, the tabular presentation of the inverse relationship between the price and demand is called demand schedule. And then we have one more person, Simon. Obviously, whatever is the price for Kate will be the price for Simon as well. They are going the same price, of course. Yeah. But what happened is that Simon is showing his choices. I mean, the two persons are different, so obviously they will also have the same preference to buy something. So for the same thing, when the price is very low, Simon is buying 16 units, whereas the price, when it goes very high, 100, £1, Simon is buying 6. And then we assume that there is Kate, Simon, Peter, Reese, Callum, Shab, Seher, Tatiana, and many more people. in the society, and we add up their demand, this plus this plus this plus this, and that becomes the market demand. And let's assume that when we add up, how come this message come? Okay, anyways, so when we add up the demand of all the people in the society, it becomes a market demand. Okay, you remember when you want to launch some product or when you want to get the customer's feedback, what do? You do some market research, you send some surveys, and from there you get the idea that, hey, if I lower the price, will people respond positively or not? And if I plan to raise the price, will people react negatively or not? Then you look at the market demand. So you get the data from the individuals, one Kate, one Simon, one Reese, one Callum, one Victoria, whosoever. And when you add all of them, it becomes the market demand schedule because it's in the form of a table. And when we plot them in the graphical form, it becomes a curve. So for example, here, I only show the market demand curve. And you can see that on the horizontal axis, I'm taking the price, and on the, on the horizontal axis, I'm taking the quantity demanded. And on the vertical axis, I'm taking the price. One more thing, you may not commit a mistake of price and demand and price. You write very well, okay? You write price and demand. And when you draw the table and the curve, you still lose marks. And then you come to me, you say, Shad, I wrote, exactly the way the answer should be. I drew the table, I drew the curve, and you were saying in the description, course description, that I love to see the curves and I love to see the tables and stuff here. So, I mean the curves, demand curves, okay, know the curves. But where are those? I made them, and you still haven't given me full marks. Once again, I'll be very sad on that day. So please don't make me sad when you do the exam. My sadness would be when I say that, hey, you said price, but you never showed, are you measuring price in pence, in cents, in pounds, in euros, in dollars? What was the, or ruble, ruble? What was the unit of the measurement of the currency? I know you wrote price, no problem. But in real life, price is not something, which fall from Jupiter on Earth. No, the price is measured in some unit of currency. You forgot to mention here. So that's why I put a cross here. And then you say, what else? Hey, you wrote about demand. Was demand in kilos or in meters or liters? Or if you're not sure, just write units. Just write units. So that's why be very, very careful. Sometimes the overexcitement when you start writing answers can be dangerous. There'll be plenty of time in the exam, believe me, to think. So don't rush to write answers. Think very carefully. Anyways, if I draw a curve based on price and Kate's demand, it will be called individual demand curve of Kate. If I draw the individual demand curve based on Simon's behavior on different prices, it will be Simon's individual demand curve. But if I want to have the aggregation, summation, add up all the consumers' demand on a given price, and then on different prices, and I show it in the form of graphical. So the graphical form of representation of the inverse relationship between the price and demand is called demand curve. It can be individual, it can be market. Okay, no problem. Determinants of price. I think I discussed it already. This is basically all the points I listed in the demand function. Do you remember it? Yeah, but somehow I felt like writing them again. Demand for X. Remember, here I'm talking about, here, if I say that, okay, I asked you a question. Can you guys explain demand function? Now this time, law of demand is not the question. The question is demand function. And you say, demand of a commodity or a service depends on different factors. Wow, fantastic. The list of factors is as below. And you write all of them. Rather, you write more factors, because see, I left the space vacant. I mentioned 9, you can mention 39, but you still lose marks. And you make me cry again. Why are you bent upon making me cry today? You know what you forgot? You forgot this X and X here. Demand for good depend upon price. Price of whose? Price of the commodity in question, or the price of a substitute? Clarify. So I think a safe way could be that when I ask you a question about explaining the demand function, you can say that the demand function is explained as below. In this answer, I assume that I'm talking about demand for coffee, or demand for tea, or demand for mobile phone, demand for food, whatever. And then write down that if you are considering demand for tea, then write here price of tea. So this should be same. Substitute, you can show with Y. So demand for X can depend upon price of Y. Demand for tea can depend upon price of coffee. Likewise. So be very careful, be precise when you answer. Taste, I forgot to mention in the previous demand function, taste is very important. If you like something, then you don't care about the price. You like it. If you don't have a taste of something, the price goes down. Let's say the certain food you hate, the certain food is prohibited to you, and if the price goes down, you will never consume it. You will never consume it. There are certain foods which I don't eat because I never like them. I mean, I don't care about the price. Even if somebody is offering me free, why should I eat it? The number and the price of substitutes, the more substitutes are available, more sensitive would be the demand function. Income of consumer, yes. By the way, distribution of income. Distribution of income and wealth is very important. I want to give you a situation. There are two cities, equally developed, equally populated. Everything is same, ceteris paribus, except one thing. In city X, the gap between rich and poor is huge. Rich are very rich, the poor are very poor. In city Y, the gap between rich and poor is not so wide. In which city you expect the market demand to be more at a given price? I remind you, I repeat, city X is very much full of disparities. I mean, rich, super poor, super poor. Is any word called super poor? Anyways, city Y, the gap between rich and poor is very small. I mean, there is, but not so much in comparison. So given the prices, given the price list here, in which city you assume the total demand to be higher or lesser comparatively. And please open your Zoom when you answer.
It should be citywide.
Can you please elaborate?
Well, there's more people who have more income, so they can spend, more people can spend money on the same goods. And in City X, there's only a small percentage of people who can spend money on anything.
Do you understand the phenomenon? In City X, the gap between rich and poor is huge. So how they will react to if the price goes down in city, let's say in City X, the price of a commodity is now slowly going down. How would the consumer respond in City X?
Well, in City X, if tons of people are super poor, they still can't afford it.
They still can't afford it.
Yeah.
And the rich, they don't care about the price anyways.
Yeah.
Very well said. It means that the market reaction will not be so big. And what happens in City Y?
Well, demand increases when price falls down.
That is why I think this is something, maybe you can unmute now. This is very important thing you mentioned, that those cities where, or those countries where the middle income, the middle class is huge, that is where the businesses are often successful, isn't so? I'm not talking about the extreme businesses like making holiday homes for football players or making some, manufacturing Ferrari type of cars. But you get my point, that whenever the multinational companies, they want to invest offshore, one important factor they have in mind is that how big is the middle class in that country. In many South Asian countries, Southeast Asian countries, the multinationals have, in the last 20, 30 years, they have really, had way. And the reason is that in those countries, there is a very fast emergence of the middle income class. So neither too poor nor too rich. Do you get my point? And when the middle income class is increasing, that makes a big impact on the consumption. For example, tourism industry. Once again, I can give you example of India because that's what is always in my radar. At one stage, traveling abroad was a luxury in India. But thanks to the middle income class emerging and people's income going up, I have noticed that if I'm traveling from wherever to wherever, there is always a group of Chinese or the Indian group of tourists. Not one or two people, but always a kind of group. And when we have a stopover, somewhere, or whenever we may be waiting for the luggage to collect, and of course I go and approach them and talk in Hindi, it finds that they are a group traveling. And I never ask them that, how could you afford it? I mean, that's very rude. But I would think that this phenomena is because the middle income people, yeah, they will never talk to me again. That would be very rich. Oh, you are traveling to New York. Okay. Could you afford it? So you can expect what answer they would give me. The one reason probably is that as the middle income people, and what is the definition of middle income people? Well, you are neither too rich nor too poor. That's why you're middle income. That number is going up, and that pushes the demand up. So in those countries, in those societies, where the middle class is thriving, is becoming more and more, is getting larger, yeah, then you can see that the demand is increasing. And then, of course, we have expectation about the future prices. Let's talk about demand for coffee again. Demand for coffee depends on price of coffee, straightforward. We have expectation that the price of coffee is going to increase in the future. Yeah. I remember one day we were drinking coffee here and Tatiana was saying that Shab, coffee is going to be expensive. And she was so accurate that after a few days, coffee price went up as if she determines the price. So that's why. So if you have expectation that the coffee price will go up in the future, then even though the current price is low, given constant, you suddenly start storing more coffee. So you start demanding more, isn't it? You did it. Okay. Okay. Keep your coffee store in locked because it may be stolen by somebody. Same way, if you expect the price to go down and the demand, the commodity we talk about is not something indispensable. You can live without it. It's not something about food, which you have to eat every day. It's not about the coffee, which you have to drink every day, but something you can postpone the consumption for something. Perhaps at a given price, the demand will go down because then you start waiting for the price to fall, isn't it? For example, houses. You have a hunch that the price of houses will go down in the near future. And that's true also. Sometimes in summertime, the prices are up. In the wintertime, the housing prices go a bit down. You have a strong reasoning that, hey, this is my strong reason. Then even though you need something now, and you can postpone it for a few months, you can still continue to live on rent for a few months. Wait till your expectation becomes true. And the population and the technology. This we discussed already. Now, I want to give you 5 minutes now. I want that you compare this curve with this curve and find out that why this curve, when the price is going down, we are moving along the same demand curve. Look, the price is very high, demand is less. The price is very low, demand is massive. I mean, whatever happens, it happens on the same demand curve. And here, what happens? The demand curve itself changes. What could be the possible reason for it? Of course, I would explain it to you, but I want you to think about it. I give you about 4 or 5 minutes to think about it, and then please answer me. And again, we have a simple protocol. When you answer, make sure that you are in Zoom. Those who are in Zoom, you don't have to be in Zoom again, but those who are present here, they need to be in Zoom. So my question is that why there is a shift in the demand curve here on slide 5th, whereas here on slide 3rd, there was no shift in the demand curve. And maybe the lady over here.
Okay. So we can talk about the movements along the shifts and the demand curve first. So the price stays basically the same, but there's increase in quantity demanded, leading to an outward sloping of the demand curve.
Excellent.
And we can talk about just the one thing, maybe an increase in income leads to an increase in quantity demanded, whereas if we compare it to the one above, everything is basically
great. So for example, when you are here, okay, see from here to here, at the same price, you are demanding more. That's only possible if some favorable things have happened in your life, except what? Except fall in the price of the commodity. So what has happened? Price of tea, okay, let's keep it same. Price of coffee, demand for coffee, yeah? Same price of coffee, you are demanding more. What could be the reason? Number one, you are richer now. Your kitchen, earlier you were very kind of miserly consuming coffee. Now you want to have, rich coffee and, more coffee. Even if it is wasted, who cares? You are a rich person now. Or it could be that the tea has become, what? Tea has become expensive. Now, because you can't consume more tea, to compensate the impact of tea, you have to consume more coffee, even though the coffee price is same. And many other factors. And same way, if you are here, if I assume that the red demand curve is your original demand curve and you move towards the blue demand curve, it could be possible that you are no longer, your income has gone down, maybe you try to be as miser, and secondly, maybe the price of tea has gone down and you are consuming more of tea and thus your coffee consumption is going down, so all kind of things happen. We have a question here from the lady, yes? Well, in this example, the demand for coffee and the price of coffee, tea is a substitute. Yeah. So if we are here on the blue line, see, and we move from blue to red, it could be possible that coffee price is same. Of course, coffee price is still OP. If you look at this, if you compare this point and this point on blue and red line, the price of coffee is still OP. Can you see from the origin to P measurement? The coffee price is still same. But the one reason why you move from blue to red is that tea has become cheaper. And you switch to tea. Sorry. I said opposite. From tea has become expensive. And because tea has become expensive, so you are even replacing your morning tea with coffee. So what happens? With no fall in the price of coffee, demand for coffee has risen because tea has become expensive. So in a nutshell, when you are strictly following ceteris paribus rule, then the demand curve would be along the movement. The relationship between price and quantity demanded would be on the given demand curve. The demand curve would never shift, but the moment you let loose the assumption of ceteris paribus, it means now income can change, the price of substitutes can change, the income distribution can change, population can, all those other variables make an inroad to the demand function, then what happens? The demand curve itself shifts. When the demand curve shifts, it means that we are now studying the relationship between this time all other variables, all other determinants are also showing their impact. All right? Make sense? Or not? One more time. This is the demand function, right?
Yeah, this makes sense and the other diagram makes sense for this.
Okay. Yeah. When we only consider that the demand for X depends on price of X, and all these things are constant, absolutely constant. They are static. The only thing which is dynamic here is this. Then the demand curve would be like this. And you can see here that when we made this demand curve, we were only talking about the demand for tea here and the price of tea. No substitute, no income, no population, no technology, nothing else counts. But when we also let these things make an impact, then we can't be on the given demand curve, then we have to shift the demand curve depending upon the situation. So when there's a shift in the demand curve, for example, here, I explained to you, the price of coffee was this much on the blue line, and the demand for coffee was this much. But what happens? The price of coffee, price of tea has become more because price of tea has become expensive. So what happens? The people start consuming more of coffee at the same price of coffee. So even though the price of coffee is still the same, OP, but the demand of coffee moved from OQ0 to OQ1. It is because the price of substitute has gone up. So what happens? You can't show this relationship between price and demand on the same demand curve. It has to shift, it has to go up. Or you have become, earlier you were not so rich, but now you're rich. So on a given price of coffee, you can demand more coffee. So when all these variables, who we include in ceteris paribus, when we no longer assume them constant, then there is a shift in the demand curve like this. You understand now? Good. And then we have now we move from demand to supply. Supply curve is opposite. The demand is from the consumer's point of view. First of all, you have to do the role playing, right? You have to change your mindset now. When you talk about the demand, you think from the point of view of a consumer, buyer. I shouldn't say consumer, I should say buyer. And when you talk about the supply, you think from the point of view of a seller. You sell. You run some business. You can be a farmer, you can be a business person, you can be a manufacturer. You can be even a service provider. You can be even some consultant. So you are selling something. When you sell something, the money comes in. But when you're a buyer and you buy something, the money goes out. So there's a difference. You know what is the difference between buyer and seller. And here, the supply says, that the law of supply says that ceteris paribus, there is a direct relationship between what? Between the price of a commodity and its supply. As the price of something goes up, you supply more because it's more profitable to sell. A rising price is a reward to the seller. Rising price is a reward to the seller. Do you get my point? Because if you are a seller and you find that the commodity which you are selling, its price is going up, that incentivizes you. And there's a reason for it. I'll tell you why. Let me make some calculations. Let's say that the price and supply. When the price was 10 euros, you were selling something 1,000 units, and your total revenue, how do you calculate your total revenue is equal to price multiply by the quantity you sell. This is how you calculate your total revenue, okay? So you are selling 1,000 units at the price of 10 euros, okay? Please, it's not a good example. So I'm not writing those units, but now I think you should understand what I mean to say. So now I can say that the total revenue is 10,000 euros. But guess what? Now, the quantity, the product which you are selling is now 11. It's more profitable to sell more. Why so? Because even though the price has gone up from 10 to 11, your cost is still same. So what happens when the price goes up? Your total revenue goes up, but total cost remains same. And we have a word called profit. Profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost. Look, your total revenue is increasing because of increase in the price, but your total cost is constant. So the gap between total revenue and total cost is widening. And this gap is called profit. It means that your profit are going up. And this is why the business people, for them, some inflation is good. What is inflation? When the price goes up. When the price goes up, when there is inflation, they can earn more revenue. And remember, I said some inflation. I didn't say inflation. Because if I say inflation, then their cost will also go up. With some inflation, their cost doesn't change much, but the revenue really changes. And as a result, the gap between the total revenue and total cost, which is the profit, widens, becomes larger, and it's good for you. It's good for you. Why shouldn't it be? But as I said, I use the word of caution that I said some inflation. But if there's a huge inflation, then the cost will not be the same, because then your wages will increase, the price of raw material will increase, the price of electricity will increase, rents will go up, bank will charge more interest from you, there'll be more expenses. And then perhaps you are in a disadvantageous situation. But with a mild inflation, there's a rule of thumb by economists that if the inflation in a country is less than 2%, depending upon the country to country, for some countries, even 2% can be more, but something, below 2%, we call it as a mild inflation. That is something which incentivizes businesses to flourish. Look, you have more profit now. You have more incentive to produce. You will hire more people. You will take more buildings on rent. The state will get more tax, spend more on the welfare in Kela and all that stuff. So what happens then? There is a good positive cycle. But only when there's a mild inflation, not huge inflation. So as a rule of thumb, if the inflation is up to 2%, it's tolerable. Right. And this, you can say that the supply curve is showing upwards. One more thing. again, I want to go into the real philosophy. There's a price here. I want you to observe it now. Or now keep your mind and eyes open. This is the price. Do you agree with me? This price was when we talk about demand, right? When we talk about demand. Now, please keep in mind, can I call it demand price? This is the price when you keep in mind when you talk about demand. Do you? Now we talk about supply. And there's a price here also. This price was relevant to who? The buyer. Kate was a buyer. Simon was a buyer. Shab was a buyer. Callum was a buyer. Christina was a buyer. Seher was a buyer. This time, there is still a price here. But this price is from whose point of view? Seller. This time you think from the seller point of view. So keep these things two things in mind, then you will be able to understand it. The price which consumer sees in the table is the maximum price which a consumer is willing to pay. For example, when Kate is buying 28 kilos, for her to make a shopping of 28 kilos, the maximum price she's willing to pay is 20 pence per kilo. You with me? Maximum price she's prepared to pay. Let's assume that this time Kate is a farmer. Let's assume that this time Kate is the farmer. And this time she is selling potatoes. Then 20 pence per kilo potato is the minimum price which she must receive. So when Kate was a buyer, 20 pence was the maximum price she is willing to pay, but not more. But when Kate is a farmer, seller, then 20 pence is the minimum price which she must get. But if the price is below 20 pence, she will not sell 50 tons of potato, whatever. So there is a change in the perspective. Isn't very common sense based thing. When you are a buyer and you go to Lidl or a Prisma or a store, you want to pay. Don't you want to, in your heart of your heart, don't you want to pay less and less and less for more and more and more quantity? And when you are a seller, see from the Prisma's point of view, you are a sales manager of Prisma. Your bonus, your promotion, your job security depends upon how much Prisma is earning. Won't you like to charge more and more and more and more price from the consumer for the same amount of shopping they do? Yes or no? Yes. So the perspective changes. So for a buyer, this price would be the minimum price. Sorry. For the buyer, this price is the maximum price you are willing to pay, not more than this. Below is welcome. But for a seller, this is the minimum price which you must get. Not below this. More is welcome. So the whole spectacles of seeing the things change. Anyways, so the supply curve is the opposite. And then basically, I will not go too much into the supply function. This is the supply function, by the way. Yeah, you with me? What factor supply depends on? It's like same. So even your supply curve, I can also show that the supply, yeah, so this is the supply function. So when the supply of something, now please look at the cursor. when the supply of something goes up, because the price of the commodity goes up. This is the movement along the supply curve, or this is the law of supply, like law of demand. But if your supply is increasing at the same price, it could be possible that, hey, the price of potato has not gone up, but guess what? The cost of producing potatoes have gone down. You can still sell more potatoes, isn't it? It could be possible that the people are liking potatoes. So the demand in the city of Uvascula for potatoes have gone up at the same price. So when there is a, when you give up this assumption of ceteris paribus, then there will be shift in the supply curve. Technology improves, market size goes up. For example, if I talk about from same example, let's come back to coffee again. Price of coffee, supply of coffee. Price of coffee, supply, not demand this time, supply of coffee. Tea has become expensive. Tea has become expensive. The consumers who buy tea, they would switch to coffee. Sell coffee more and make money. Hey, this is the time to attract tea drinkers and make them coffee addicts. So this is called movement, this is called shift in the supply curve. The shift only happens if you give up the assumption of ceteris paribus. And then finally, we have this classic example of capitalism or market economy or free market mechanism, the demand curve and supply curve. When they meet each other, they cut each other, then we develop the point of equilibrium. This demand curve is drawn. This demand curve represents buyers. The supply curve representing the sellers. There is a buyer's price, there is a seller's price, and when they cut each other, this junction is created. That is called equilibrium. And this is called free market mechanism because there is no, this curve is not demanded by, this is not made by any government or any state ruling. This is made by the markets mechanism function. Okay, and when they meet, that is the equilibrium price, and that is the equilibrium quantity so this is the ideal quantity demanded and supplied in the market, and this is the ideal price per unit. And the beauty of this free market economy or this price mechanism is that this is self-adjusting mechanism based relationship. Just in case, so you can see here the demand curve and supply curve. The equilibrium price is 60. Now, please pay attention to the cursor. The equilibrium price is 60. Imagine there is some disturbance in the market. The market is not working as it should. And suddenly, because of these disturbances, the price went up to 80. So guess what? At 80, demand is this much, but at 80, supply is this much. And why this happens? When the price goes up from 60 to 80, demand will go down, but supplier would be very happy if they can supply more. So at a price movement from 60 to 80, demand is this much, look at the cursor, and supply is from here to this much. Whenever you have a situation when supply is this much and demand is this much, what happens to price? In other words, when supply is more and demand is less, what happens? When something is more in supply and demand is less, what happens to its price? Goes down. So automatically price will go back from where it started to 60. Similarly, there's another kind of disturbance in the market, in the economy, and the price is 40. The price should be 60, but the price is 40. When the price is below equilibrium, it's good for the consumers. The buyers will be very happy. See, at 40, they are looking forward to buy this much. But supplier would be very angry because the seller would be very angry because they have to sell at low price now. So many of them choose not to supply because maybe they are not even covering their cost. So when the price is low, supply is less. And whenever demand is more, look at the cursor, and supply is less, what happens to price? It goes up. This price is increased or decreased not by the state, but by the automatic functioning of the market economy. And this is called price mechanism, which ensures the free play of market forces of demand and supply, and with the minimum interference by the state. Okay, and if there is any surplus means more supply, less demand, or if there is any shortage, means more demand, less supply, it will be automatically corrected by the price mechanism. And what is price mechanism? The equilibrium price where the demand and supply are equal. If it happens, we say that this is the free market economy. I think I mentioned once in the classroom that if you have to say what is capitalism, what is free market economy, what is price mechanism, without speaking a single word, just draw this picture. Just draw this picture. This picture is a manifestation of the free market economy. And here what I did, I just took the same example, the same price, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. Then I took this table from the demand, market demand, and then I took this table from the supply, put them together, and I find that when the price is 60, demand and supply are equal. So when the price is 60, demand and supply are equal. And there we go. That's equilibrium. Simple. Okay, so we continue our discussion. And here, I'm not going to discuss any new concept with you, but you can see here that sometimes your supply doesn't change. The supply of coffee is as available in the market, but because tea has become expensive, then the demand curve of tea increases. It shifts. And as a result, the whole equilibrium in the market gets disturbed, and then there's a new equilibrium. So for example, if you look at the blue lines, the demand curve and supply curve, G was the point of the original equilibrium. You can see the demand curve and supply curve of coffee. And then what happens? That there is no change in the supply curve of coffee, but the demand curve of coffee shifts rightwards, upwards. It could be because tea has become expensive and many consumers are shifting, are migrating from tea to coffee. So means coffee is more in demand. And as a result, what happens? The new equilibrium is arriving at point I. So I is the point of new equilibrium. And at I, you can see that not only the quantity in the economy, in the market has gone up, but even there is an increase in the price of coffee overall. Overall, there's an increase in the price of coffee than before. And same thing can happen, so we can create all types of equilibrium, but as long as you understand the basic philosophy that this is the main idea. Any other shift change is corresponding to it. So every time there is an equilibrium, there is a new, there is a shift in the demand curve or supply curve. There's a new equilibrium point arriving. It with the help of, maybe I can draw by myself here. But disclaimer, I'm not going to draw, I'm not going to label anything. So you assume that what is demand curve and what is supply curve. So if I draw it, let's say on the vertical axis, I take price. And on the horizontal axis, I take demand and supply. And here I take the price, and you can do all the labeling by yourself. So if this is the demand curve, I call it D1, D1. And this is a supply curve. I call it S1, S1. Then the equilibrium is where both are meeting. This is the equilibrium price. So OP1 is the equilibrium price, and OQ1 is the quantity which is demanded and supplied in the market. But life is never static. Life keeps changing. And if it happens that suddenly this thing is more in demand, maybe people have a taste for it, sudden taste, because of consumerism. Maybe this product is now demanded more because people are rich. Or maybe the substitute has become expensive. And suddenly what happens, the demand shifts to D2. And guess what happens? And the supply curve is still the same. It doesn't change. Yeah, you get my point? Now this equilibrium becomes absolutely irrelevant. Look, market is dynamic. We don't keep cribbing about the past. We move on. And guess what happens? We move on to E2 now. Okay? Because see what? Your demand curve and supply curve, where they meet now. What is the new point of meeting? E2. This is the new equilibrium. At new equilibrium, guess what happens? The quantity demanded goes up to Q2. Sorry, demanded and supplied both, equilibrium. And by the way, the net impact is that the price has also gone up. This is why we sometimes notice that, hey, the prices are increasing in the economy, but at the same time, there is more quantity traded. It is because of this thing. Because the demand and supply factors, they keep playing their own role, but when there's a shift, when there's a movement, it also impacts our equilibrium. Our equilibrium is changing very fast. In fact, soon I would give you an example when you will see with your own eyes that how equilibrium is changing after every second. But you have to wait for it. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask, does it also connect to the profit peak, that total cost minus total revenue?
Yes.
And the profit on the D2 and the equilibrium 2 will also grow?
Very good, very good. It does change. See, it's like, it's called, we use a phrase in economics called ripple effect. Sorry for this strange kind of thing. It's not fipple, but ripple. Maybe I use the eraser here. Okay. Have you heard this phrase ripple before? When, what is this? When you throw stone in the water, what happens? The surface area is disturbed. There's a tension in the surface area. Have you seen it? Just throw the pebble in the water. What happens? There's a tension. It means it's up to a certain territory of water, not the whole lake, not the whole sea with one stone. There is some disturbance created. Same thing happens here. So when there's a one change, there's a shift in the demand curve, or there's a shift in the supply curve, or both, this will have an impact on the price, on quantity, on revenue, on cost, thus on the profits. I can make even more strange picture that we have the demand curve, we have supply curve, okay? Demand curve increases and supply curve also shifts like this. Yeah? So the new equilibrium is new demand curve and new supply curve here. So all type of possibilities happen. You can't stop demand curve from moving up and down. You can't stop supply curve from moving up and down. So they meet where they have to meet. Okay? Is it fine? You convinced with this? Yeah, that's something we did. This is something where I want to draw your attention to it. This is very important. I just gave a statement. I just gave a statement that demand, you can't stop demand curve and supply curve from going wherever they want. Of course, if you leave it to the total market mechanism, you can't stop it. But look at the impact of it. If the demand and supply curve can go in any direction, anytime, anywhere, it will be creating so many disturbances that it can be harmful to certain sections of society. If demand curve and supply curve are moving in such a way that the overall prices are going up, and we are talking about the bare necessities, the food, shelter, and clothing, or poor sections of the society would be devastated. They would be in a very bad shape. Okay? So what happens then? We have to create some safety mechanism for them. We have to save them. And then what happens? The government suddenly comes in the picture and exile the free market mechanism. No, it doesn't happen like this. The government comes in the picture. It still let the free market mechanism to play its role, but with some accountability, with some interference. For example, let's say here, pay attention. Here, I talk about the demand and supply of food. Sorry, yeah. I talk about the demand and supply of what? The food. Remember it. And here, this is the demand curve of food, and this is the supply curve of food. And think from the seller's point of view. Who supplies food? The farmers. The farmers. The farmers have a insecurity that if they supply too much of food, instead of being rewarded, they would be penalized, they would be punished. You know why? Because when the food comes too much in the market, and remember, the food is not like making furniture. You can make any time of the day, any hour of the day. You can move food, furniture wherever you want, from wherever you can postpone the demand for food, for the furniture as well. Can you compare furniture with food? No. The food crops, they are ready at certain time of the year. You can't produce them all. You can store them, by the way. You can save them in Prisma cold store or wherever you want. But think from the point of view of an average size farmer. They can only supply food at certain time of the year. They have a problem. The problem is that if they supply more food and there is no safety net by the state, the price of the food will go down, because we read in the theory that if supply is more and demand is less, the price goes down. Look, supply of food comes at certain point of time, but do we start eating more during those months? No. Our demand pattern for food is very stable. Food is something we never start consuming more when the price is down, and we don't start consuming less when the price is up. It's very stable, very pattern. Look at your consumption habits. Fairly stable, fairly stable. But this can impact the farmers. Then comes the government, and the government comes, hey, what are you complaining about? The farmer representatives say, look, this is the demand curve of food. This is the supply curve. This is the equilibrium. But the problem is that at this equilibrium price, we can't cover our cost. This price is too low. It's not sustainable. And then the state comes and say, hey, don't you worry. I give you guarantee that the price of the food will be not OP, whatever is this, but the minimum price will be this much. I don't care about what market mechanism is saying. I assure you that the state is saying it, I would never let the price fall below this. You with me? Now, this line is straight. Why so? Because this is a decree. This is the state's dictate. The state says the minimum price will be this much. We don't care about surplus. We don't care about anything else. But this is the minimum price which I guarantee to give you as a farmer. Are farmers happy now? Are farmers happy? They are happy because see what? They get a guarantee. And then I give you a link here. Please read this article, please. It's very important. There is a big protest going in India by the farmers for last over a year. And this is about the minimum price, because the farmers in certain parts of India are demanding that, you know what, give us some kind of guarantee so that we produce. Imagine you are doing some economic activity and the outcome is absolutely uncertain. It's like gambling. They say that, hey, give us a guarantee that you will give us certain minimum price. The real price which farmer can get can be more, no problem, more the merrier. But they want some minimum price guarantee. And read this article and you will find that what is the minimum price, why it's important for the farmers. It's important for those people who produce things which only grow in some seasons. I can also replace this example by the fishermen, because I know that in certain seas, certain fishes are only growing in certain times of the year, and then they're not available. You have to store them. Okay, you get my point? But then there's another problem. If the state is giving a guarantee to the farmer at a price which is way above the equilibrium price, can you see here? Then it's possible that the poor buyers would be affected adversely. The farmers know that this is the price per kilo of potatoes they would get. Okay, they're happy, but what about the common consumers? the buyers, the poor income people. For them, potato is a staple food. They can't survive without it. Then what happens? Then again, state comes and say, you know what? This is the equilibrium price, the same price OPE here. State is saying to the consumers, which consumers? The lower income consumer, that, hey, this is the price which equilibrium says, demand curve and supply curve, OPE, this one, but I don't care about it. State asks all the sellers that, hey, even though the price, the equilibrium price is this much, but never charge a single cent more than this from the consumers. So in other words, the state is acting like a Robin Hood, giving more price to the farmers and charging less price from the consumers. Only state can do it. The private entities can never do it. Think about it. If you're a private organization, you are buying expensive. Look, you're buying expensive. The price should be this, but you are buying at this price and selling at this price. You should sell price. You should be selling at this price, but you're selling at low price. You're buying expensive, selling cheaper. The private organization would become bankrupt. First of all, they would never agree to do it. If they do it, they would become insolvent. Who can do it? State. This is why the role of state in a democracy, in a free market mechanism working economy, even if it is purely capitalistic society, the role of state can never be undermined. I was talking to one of my students, somebody, maybe it was with you, gentleman here, or some other person, few weeks ago, and I gave the example of USA. That USA is the classic example of free market economy. Even there, 25% of the GDP come from the public sector, which means the state sector. So state is so important. We are living in the modern state. The concept of modern state is very important. It's a welfare state. Otherwise, why the state exists? The state is safeguarding the interests of different stakeholders. Look, in this picture, when you look at this price, the minimum guarantee price, it's like a guarantee to the farmers. Hey, you will get minimum this price. And this is a guarantee to the consumers, buyer, hey, you will not pay more than this price. Look, farmers happy, the poor people happy. And in between, what happens? There are no free lunches. After all, state has to bear this burden. And this burden comes from where it comes from? Taxation. That we shall study in which topic? Fiscal policy. Fiscal policy. Subsidies. Subsidies to some people at the expense of taxes from the other. Collect taxes from people who can, who should, and then channelize. So this redistribution is called, is part of the fiscal policy. So this is why I believe in capitalism. I believe in free market economy. But if the free market economy is only to produce and earn, I don't like it. I want that distribution and redistribution is very, very important in capitalism. I use the word distribution and redistribution. Let me tell you, when I'm a private corporation, I'm giving wages, let's say, to this gentleman. Seher is my banker. I pay her interest. I pay other expenses to the other people. This is called distribution. I earn, I sell, I earn money, and then I pay to my stakeholders. This is called distribution. The problem is that it could be possible that some people in this distribution get more and some get less. then we have to redistribute. And who is the stakeholder? Which entity comes in the redistribution process? State, in the form of taxes, in the form of subsidies. State thinks that SHAB has paid these people too much and these people too less. Okay, keep SHAB aside. Take more money from people who have been paid more by SHAB and give it to those people who are paid less by SHAB. There we go, redistribution. Unless there is explicit, clear-cut emphasis on distribution and redistribution, no model can be successful, be it capitalism, be it socialism. We have so many examples of failed socialism. And once again, the reason is that distribution and redistribution, which should have been the cornerstone of socialism, were not given due respect. To me, any model is fine as long as you pay proper attention to capitalism, to distribution and redistribution. Okay, now here in this article, you will see how the farmers are protected, or at least they're protesting to be protected. Because the current regime in India is a little bit more about capitalistic. They're too pro businesses. They're nice people, some of them, but they are too much pro business class, and the farmers feel threatened. And when you read this article, this UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development website, UNCTAD, we also call it UNCTAD, you'll find this article, and it talks about how the consumers are protected in many countries and what happens if they are not protected. So that's why I use this acronym, or I use this metaphor of Robin Hood, that the state is taking care of the farmers, and the state is at the same time is taking care of the low income consumers. Okay. So even though this picture is also talking about capitalism, the free market economy, the market mechanism, the price mechanism, but it talks about some discipline, some control. And if I have to write one sentence to show this picture, both sides, I would call it managed price mechanism. See the word managed price mechanism. It's still price mechanism, but there's some management, some micromanagement is done by the state. Can you see it? Look at this line. This is a micromanagement done by the state to look after the interest of farmers. Hey, don't worry about low price, which you will get in the pure form of capitalism. We'll give you more price. Consumers, buyers, hey, don't worry about too high price, which you otherwise would have paid in a totally free market economy. We will not let anybody charge more price than this from you. So this tweaking, this, the remote, the fine tuning, this fine tuning of fixing the price upward and fixing the price downwards is called, if I have to use one phrase, managed price mechanism or managed market mechanism. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you, is it, how to normally explain it, like even if for supplier it's surplus, but for the buyer it's shortage, the price with what like, for example, state is buying from supplier is always lower when buyers are buying the product from the shop? Is it always
Yeah, very good question.
Did
And
you get my idea?
I got your
my
point.
question?
I got your point.
Yeah, thanks.
It's a very good point you raised. See what? Pay attention. This surplus you see here, let's talk about the potatoes, right? Potatoes, farmers, potato consumers. Now, stick with this. This surplus would never exist if there is no state's role in the economic matters. This surplus would never exist. But can you see here that when the state is giving the guarantee price to the farmers, this surplus exists. And who takes this surplus? The state takes the surplus. And the state is saving it where? In the storage. So that they can meet up this shortage. Shortage by the poor consumers, the low-income people. So this is why we have I don't know if you have heard this phrase. Since you asked me, I want to share with you. There is a phrase called public distribution system. Public, not the private, public distribution system. When the state is buying something, all right, the surplus from the farmers, the state is buying. And if there's a shortage among the low-income people, the state is giving them. In many countries, I know in many developing countries, the state has its huge storage of food items, which it buys from the farmers, and it gives almost at a free price, no price, or very low price to the certain sections of society. I think I know in some states in India, in southern India, because over there people eat rice more than anything else. There's certain quota of rice per family, which is given nearly free, you know, and that's only possible if state has stock the food. Okay, so when there was a more price offered to the farmers than this price, there was surplus. State took the surplus, and when the state want to lower the price for consumers, there would be shortage, and this shortage is met by the state, and this is called public distribution system. Yep. So this is also an example of fiscal policy when the state is buying something expensive and giving it cheaper to the others. That was a good question. Yeah, now I want to give you an example of the real life price mechanism. No security to farmers. Well, the farmers are not in the stock market. Now I show you the purest form of capitalism. Okay, it would be even better if I show you live. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I went to the website of Yahoo Finance, and I took the data of FTSE 100, the top 100 companies in London Stock Exchange. And I saw that the index for the last 5 years, can you see here 5 year, 5Y, 5 years, has been this. There was almost a stock market crash in 2020, no surprise because of COVID. Things are getting a little bit better than since then, but before COVID, the market was doing fine. Each point here, each point is the equilibrium point here. You know why? How do you fix the price of a share or a stock? Demand for the stocks by investors and supply of stock by the investors. Some people want to sell some shares, some people want to buy some shares. And when they do the matchmaking, the demand curve and supply curve, then the point of equilibrium is established. And you can see that there is a continuous line here. The line is not like a break. Line is not like that. The line is constant. It shows that the demand, and you can draw maybe 1,000,000 of demand and supply curves if you want to draw at every point on this line. So this line is a classic example of capitalism. You can ask me, where is demand curve and where is supply curve? Well, at each point, so if for example, I make if I redraw this type of curve, like this, let's say this is the graph, something like this. Then at each point, you can draw a supply curve and a demand curve. Next point, supply curve, demand curve. So when you have all these equilibriums and you join them in one line, that shows that there is a continuity of equilibrium points. And these equilibriums are established every second, every minute. This is the most appropriate example of the purest form of capitalism. And I will try my best to show you if I'm not sure if the market is open now. It should be. If I take you to a web page, not this one, this is something else. If I take you to Yahoo Finance, can you see this? And let's say we look at the price of some company. Let's talk about Apple. Apple Incorporation, New York, okay. Am I recording it? Can you please check if I'm recording it? Always tell me if I'm not recording, because otherwise I have to start. No, it's recording. So this is the Apple.
Could you please share the screen, Chab?
I'm not sharing it. Okay, sorry, I'll do it. My apologies. So if, for example, if I want to draw the chart, and if I want to have a chart of last 5 years, oh, it's already 5 years. It's Apple, you can see, from 2016 to 2021 already. And you can see here that there's a continuous line going on, which means that each point of this blue line is a demand curve and supply curve. So why this point move from here to here? Because the demand and supply curve goes up. So if you have the infinite demand curves and supply curves and join them in one point, that would be showing the typical example of free market economy. Here, there is no guarantee to the farmers, and there is no price guarantee to the poor consumers, because, you know, why should we? You know, you can never say that, hey, the Apple price can never go up beyond this point. You know, so there is no public distribution system in this case. This is the game of the rich people, you know. But the problem is that at this time in America, in the US, the market is not open. I want to show you some company now in Europe, which is trading. Let me see if Finnair is available. Oh yes, Finnair is available in Helsinki. So please pay attention to it. Maybe soon you will see that these numbers are changing. And if it is red, it means the price is going down. And if it is green, it means the price is going up. So you would notice that the price change after every, you know, few minutes or few seconds. It seems to be very stable. So if I change some other company, oh no, not this one, Payoneer. If yeah, so when you see the red lines, the red numbers, it means the price is going down. And why the price of something goes down? If its demand is going down, decreasing, and supply is going up. So more people are offering to sell Nokia and less people are willing to buy Nokia. Then the price of Nokia will go down, okay, or anything for that matter. And why would the price go up, which should be shown by the green light? I haven't seen green light yet. Maybe the market is very slow today. If the lights are green, it means the price is going up. And why would the price go up? It will go up if demand is increasing, which means more people are willing to buy Nokia, and supply is going down. It means less people are willing to sell Nokia. So that way it works. Okay. And now I bring you back to the slides. Here we are. Another concept before we, what time are we finishing today? 15. So maybe we don't touch this topic yet. So when we meet next time, I quickly go through it, and then we go to monetary and fiscal policy. And I'm very sure that monetary and fiscal policy, you already have some understanding now, I assume. So it won't take too long. Maybe maximum 1 hour will be about it. So then I would leave it till the next week, and we can stop our meeting now. So thank you very much for your attention. But I would strongly recommend you that don't disappear. Well, if you have no question, you may disappear, but we still have 10 minutes, and now the time that we can discuss something. If you have questions with each other, please go about it. And if you want to ask something to me, please feel free, and I will stop recording now.